And we're live today. You guys, I'm so excited that you guys joined me today. We've got a special guest, Joie Seldon, who is here with us today. And she has an amazing background. And I'm really excited to learn, not only is she an author, but she's a professional actor. She's been an acting coach. She's learned and studied and taught improv. And she's got a whole world of education and experience and wisdom behind her today. And she's joining us today to have a conversation with us kind of about the tough stuff that we've found ourselves trapped in as we've tried to declutter and de-hoard our homes. So please help me welcome Joie Seldon. Joie, how are you today?
I'm very good, thanks. Happy to be here.
I was really excited when I heard that you were going to come on our show today because of the wealth of experience that you bring to the table. And I'm hoping you'll share with our listeners a little bit about how you arrived in this situation.
I was an acting teacher, actor and acting teacher. And actually, before I was a teacher, when I was in my 20s and trying to be a movie star in Hollywood and failing miserably, I had an epiphany one day that I was not supposed to be miserable. I came from a pretty unhappy family. I was out on my own. I was very young and naive. And I went on a path of searching to find out, why are we unhappy as people and what makes us more fulfilled? And so it was a long journey that ultimately led me to understanding a lot about emotions. I was a very emotional person, but I was always willing to really feel my feelings, no matter how difficult they were. And that always benefited me. So eventually I brought that into my acting work. I quit acting. I came back to it. So it's been a big journey, but it has been that connection with self-expression and understanding why we're here as human beings that has really motivated me.
Well, I have a question about emotions, and I know you wrote the book on emotions, and I would love for you to share with us about that. But my question is, because emotions are really tough to take a look at, and you said you were okay looking at your emotions, and that is a really tough thing for a lot of people. So how did that work?
It is. And it is the number one thing that stops us is that we have so many messages about don't feel bad, feel better, buy this product, do this thing so you don't feel bad. And so we have this languaging around emotions that labels them as negative, a lot of them anyway. And what I've discovered is that emotions are a part of our innate being. They are a biological information system. And by biological, I mean, how do we know we're having an emotion? We feel it in our body. We feel sensations. And you know the difference between sadness and anger because they feel very differently in your own being. So my ability and willingness to feel my emotions helped me to understand what was going on. And I did a lot of education and workshops and read books and went back to school eventually to learn even more. And I've come to understand that our resistance to them is because we have beliefs and attitudes about emotions that tell us, well, anger is bad and fear means you're weak and shame is really terrible. You don't want to feel shame. So we resist feeling our emotions. We're either in denial about them or we avoid them. And I think that's one of the issues around clutter and hoarding. And I was the opposite. I was a perfectionist. I had to have everything perfect in its perfect place. And that was my own way of kind of coping. So we have behaviors that are coping mechanisms, only they don't serve us because of the fear of, oh, if I feel that, it will mean something bad about me, or it will be too painful or too difficult to handle. And so my mission is really about educating people in a way so they understand your emotions are bringing you information that's crucial to your actual well-being. So I view all emotions as positive. It's our inability to handle them and deal with them and utilize them that causes a negative results. It's not the emotion itself.
Well, now you mentioned you were really tidy growing up, but you said that you were struggling like many people.
Mhm.
And then you said you were willing to look at your emotions. So did you just like wake up one day and go, ta-da, today I'm looking at my emotions?
No.
Or was it was it more of an in-depth process that you had to go through?
It was an in-depth process. Yeah, I spent really 40 years, digging in. I mean, the last 20 years of my life have been night and day compared to how I was as a young adult and my growing up. I was left alone a lot. I was very lonely and sad kind of person. And I had a tremendous amount of repressed anger, which I
Mhm.
eventually got in touch with. What I would do is have temper tantrums as a kid. That's how I would let it out. And as an adult, I would have a temper tantrum.
Mhm.
And so it was actually one of the things that motivated me. Let me understand, I had a curiosity, and that's one thing I want to invite people is to have a curiosity about their emotions and their feelings and about themselves, so that I learned over time. I studied, I read books and did workshops and things that enlightened me, as it were. And then I had my own motivation, because I just did not want to be a miserable, unfulfilled person. So I kept working at it, and I learned a lot. And so what I've done is to try to distill the things that I spent 40 years learning into something that somebody can get by reading a chapter from my book, or having a conversation with me, or watching one of my videos, where they can go. I have so many times I've had a client or student say, "Oh, I never thought about it that way. I never
Mhm.
understood it that way." So that's what I'm trying to convey, is bring it to a simpler way of understanding.
Well, and you went so far beyond just reading books and taking courses. You went back to school and you got a master's in somatic counseling psychology.
Yes,
And so you took this very seriously. Like you're not
I
screwing
did.
around.
No, I was not. I
Mhm.
was teaching acting, and I thought I will create a class for my acting students called Accessing Your Emotions. And what I
Mhm.
found is that their acting did improve. They loved it in terms of their acting, but they would come to me and say, this is changing my life. I think I need therapy. Or I had a conversation with my husband that like I've never had before. And this was like, oh, well, this is something that's bigger than me.
Mhm.
It's something more than my own journey. And so that's when I went back to school, because I wanted to understand the psychology and the relationship. And I discovered somatic, which is the soma is the whole person, including the body. And so we experience everything, not just in our minds. We tend to be very mental people. We experience them in our whole being. And when I got that connection, it just expanded the work that I had already been doing.
One of the things that we see a lot in the clutter space is we find people get really busy in their lives,
Mm,
and many people, and oddly enough, and this is so weird, I can't explain it, but the biggest cluttering slash hoarding people that we find in all of the years that I've been doing this, and I've been cleaning people's homes for the last 32 years. I've been
mhm,
inside thousands of homes. The people that we find are doctors and nurses and attorneys, and they're people who spend all of their days giving to other people and
mm.
helping other people and serving other people, and then they get home and they're just exhausted and they're like, I just can't do it for myself.
Right.
And they just kind of let their own space go, saying, I'm going, and we call it the mom syndrome, I'm going to
Mhm,
take care of everyone else first and I'll take
mm.
care of my own self last. And
Right.
so but then they feel shame and they don't want to invite people over to their homes, and they're
Mm.
embarrassed because now my own home doesn't reflect the
Uh-huh.
salvation I'm trying to provide everyone else.
Right. Right. It doesn't really shock me to hear that. I think women as a whole are conditioned to be selfless. I mean, it is a little bit of our nature to want to help and be there for other people. And I was taught that I was selfish when I wanted something for myself. And so I think that there's this disconnect of what we really need is, that thing on an airplane, to put your own mask on first.
Mhm.
We need that. We call it self-care, but it's so much more than that. It's really about your relationship with yourself. And that's one of the benefits that I've personally experienced and that I've seen in my clients is they have a much healthier relationship with themselves, and they're able to ask for what they need, speak up, to communicate, and to really make themselves more of a priority, and to really rely on the truth that's within themselves. And that is thrilling to watch, and it's also very satisfying for the people who experience that.
Well, I got a question for you, and this is kind
Mhm,
of a tough question, and we
mhm,
we deal with this a lot where, let's say, for example, nurses who are in retirement centers and they watch people die every day. And so to get in touch with their own emotions is like,
mhm.
I just don't have it to give. And so when they get home and their homes are cluttered and their homes are, it's overwhelming for them to go ahead and face their own emotions. What advice would you give them?
This is very interesting question, because what I was thinking as you were telling me, these professions that you're speaking of, these are professions that have an enormous amount of emotional impact because of what they actually do. And so there does need to be a certain amount of objectivity so that they're not taking into their own bodies all the patients' emotional traumas and stresses and things. So there's a thing called energetic boundaries, and I work with
Mm,
that. I teach people how to create an energetic boundary. We tend to think there's, oh, this is just empty space between you and I. But we are actually made up of vibration. Quantum physics shows us that everything is made up of vibration. And we can actually use this vibratory energy that comes from our own space to create a boundary that helps to protect us energetically. And I mean, there's a lot I can say about that, but that's one thing I really find extremely valuable with my clients, is when they learn how to do that. And then the other thing is that people are afraid that if I feel this emotion fully, I'm going to get stuck there, or it's
mm.
never going to end. If I get in touch with my grief, it will never end. If I get in touch with my anger, when I first really got in touch with my anger, I was terrified. I was afraid if I express this anger, I'm just going to destroy whatever's in front of me. It was really scary. It was really kind of weird. Uh,
But what did you have to lose? Because if you're really angry and the world is kind of falling apart anyway, what have you got to lose but to stop and say, "Hey, what if it gets better?"
Yes, and I learned that, and I learned specific ways. I developed them, I learned them from others, and I teach safe ways, healthy ways to express your anger. You don't have to tell the person that you're angry with to their face. You don't have to scream and yell. That's not
Mm.
the only option. You can go into a guided visualization and meditation. I have one in my book and in the audiobook. I guide people through this. You can do writing. I have a technique called a screw you letter, where you just write everything that you want to, just like, get it out on paper. Don't censor yourself, because you're not going to mail this letter.
Uh-huh.
But you write it, you tuck it away, you hide it, symbolic of how we hold in our subconscious mind our emotions in our body. Bring it out, write some more another day, stick it away, bring it out, read what you've written with the intention of releasing this. Your intention is really important. So if you have an intention, this is not to hurt anybody, to punish anybody, it's to get it out of my system, then you can release that, and that energy moves out of your body.
I love that. Oh, I'm so excited that you joined us today. This is just awesome. For those of you that are just joining us, hi, how you doing? I'm so glad you're here. This is Joie Seldon, and she's experiencing some amazing stuff that she's sharing with us based on her own experience and her own background. And I just absolutely love this. You mentioned you have a book. Can you tell us about your book? Because you've referenced it a couple of times, and we all got to go get a copy of that.
Yeah, yeah, great. And it just dawned on me, you're decluttering inside. When you express these emotions and you let them out, and it can be your grief or anything, then you're actually cleaning up what's inside of you. And what people don't realize, it's fun. That's what I think. So this is my book. It's called Emotions. Let me get it in the camera here. Emotions and Owner's Manual. And it is on Amazon. You can get it in all versions, Kindle, audible.com, and written. And the book is about, it is an owner's manual. Its emotions are a biological information system, and they're telling you what your relationship is to whatever it is that you're experiencing. And when you allow yourself to be present with your fear or anger or sadness, then you get information about what the meaning of this experience is. And you, as the adult, get to make a conscious choice. If you don't acknowledge your emotions, then they kind of run the show because they're going to keep showing up until you acknowledge them. That's the way they work. And so it seems intangible, and yet we experience emotions in our body. So, for example, sadness is a big one. You can cry a little bit, you can have some grief if someone passes or that kind of experience, but we have all kinds of losses. So, sadness is about loss. Its essence is about loss. And so when you recognize, oh, I've lost an idea that was a great idea, I've lost a scarf that I loved, I've lost control of my home, there might be grief there. And so when you process that through and you feel that, that energy moves through you and you are cleansed from that experience.
So if somebody was in a state of grief
Mhm.
and they're holding on to things that no longer have, it's just emotional attachment to a
Mhm.
previous person that's no
Yeah.
longer with us, how do they feel that emotion in order to process it? Because grief has many different forms and it takes different amounts of time for different people.
It does. And I really recommend actually setting aside a specific time where you can sit with yourself and just invite the emotion to come forth. It may sound kind of silly, but that's what I do. I just sit and say, okay, what am I feeling? What is here? And you start to get to know the sensations in your own body. And like you said, it is different because we have different makeups, we have different personalities, we have different things that have meaning to us. But one of the things that helps people to know is that genuine grief is really a way of honoring the person or the thing that you have an attachment to by feeling that emotion, because we don't have grief about the loss of something we don't care about.
Mhm.
So it has to do with value. And so when you recognize, oh, my feeling this grief and letting this go is a way of honoring that person or honoring this relationship, then I think it makes it easier to move through that. It's not about letting go of the person, it's letting go of the symbolism of that person.
And on the flip side of that, and this is a shout out to all of our friends who have ADHD.
Mm,
I know that as a house cleaner, and I've been training house cleaners for the last 32 years,
mhm.
one of the best ways that we have worked through grief, oddly enough, is cleaning. And I say that's a weird thing, but you're physically doing something,
Yes,
but you're alone with your thoughts. So
yes.
if you turn off the podcasts and you turn off the TV and the
Mhm.
distractions, but you are alone with your thoughts in that same meditative state that Joey is talking about,
Yes.
but you're doing something. And the something is movement. And I say movement because if you're cleaning something,
Mhm.
you will see progress at the end. If you're not a cleaner, that's fine. Put on a pair of running shoes and get outside and go for a walk, a brisk walk, like you're in a hurry to go somewhere. Because what happens as you're cleaning or as you're moving, what happens is you start circulating the blood and the oxygen through your body. And all of a sudden, endorphins start kicking in and you start to feel better while you're processing those thoughts. And Joey mentioned earlier something that I would love to ask about, and that's the energetic boundaries that are created. Because if you're afraid of your emotions and you're afraid of energy, then it's easy to either hang on to the wrong kind of energy or the wrong kind of emotions. And I don't mean wrong; they're all good if we process them, but hanging on to them in a way that's not advantageous for us is what I mean to say. And so can you share with us a little bit about just working with our energy in a state of healing instead of just kind of like being trapped and not knowing what to do with that energy?
Yes, and I love what you just said about movement, because I always go to the body. If you wanna regulate your emotions, you go to your body. And you know how when somebody walks in the room that you really love, you perk up, you feel, there's, "Oh, I feel better, that person's around," and then other people walk in the room and you go, "Oh," you just you know, uh, so That's because that's that vibration that moves between us. And so this was the most valuable thing I learned in grad school is that we have, if you've heard of auras. Well, we have a field that emits around our body, an energetic field. And if you really stop and think about it, you can get in touch with that and you can actually pull it in
Mm.
with your imagination. When I did this exercise that I did in a class, one of my classes in grad school, I discovered that I had my boundary was way out. And so I was always upset with my neighbors, or I was upset about this going on in the world. And I was always reacting to everything. And when I could pull it in, and I practiced this in my car so that my car was my boundary,
Mm.
everything outside of it disappeared. It just like I wasn't bothered by it at all. And I became more aware of my own presence. So, one of the things people can do is just with your imagination, imagine you're in a bubble and it may be invisible to someone on the outside, but you're aware of it and you're going to pull it into about 3 feet around you, like an egg around you, and just feel that energy. Feel the sense of your own self expanding out to that, but then there's this boundary. And it's very, very good if you're going to have a conversation with someone, a difficult conversation, to use this as a sense that there's this a boundary between you and the other person. And then just sit with that. You can sit in a chair and put a rope around the chair. Or I used to take scarves and with clients and have them sit in the chair and then put a circle of scarves around like a circle so that they could imagine, oh, that's my boundary. And
Mhm.
then people would just go, oh, I could see them viscerally relax and they would start to feel into themselves. And that's where you have your most power.
When I was young, I was really angry. I was just a really angry person. I don't know
Mhm.
why, but I was just like, ah, And when I came in, I started coming to awareness of my own personal energy. I realized that I have personal power. And if I'm not careful, I'm going to use it in a bad sort of way that's going to
Mhm.
like ruin friendships and stuff.
Mhm.
And so at the time, and I love to sew. And so for me, and you talk about the imagination, for me, I was thinking of threading a bobbin, and you put the bobbin on top of the sewing machine, and you hold
Mhm.
your finger here, and as the machine spins, the bobbin spins, the thread goes up and down and up and down, and it creates this, bobbin
Mhm.
full of thread. So I
Right.
imagined that I was in the center of the bobbin, and there was this great big bobbin of white light that was going around me just
Ah,
as fast as, just kind of like, and I would every day before I would leave the house, I would stand at the front door and I would imagine this bobbin of light going around me, just kind of like encompassing me. And I was like, okay, now I'm protecting myself from, exploding on other people. And I'm going to
mhm.
invite people into my space. They're not going to just like bounce in because like there's this little barrier of white light. And
Mhm.
so before I interact with anyone, to be consciously aware, I've got this little protection around me. So I'm safe and other people are safe from me. But if I'm going to
Mhm.
interact with them, I have a choice as to whether or not I'm going to invite them in. And I'm going to be careful that I don't just, it on them. So it was kind of goes both ways.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. That's incredibly intuitive of you. And I do work with white light. I also feel myself energized, like coming from above my head, a white light coming in through my whole body. And then I surround that with a blue light and surround that with rose light. I mean, you can use, and rose gold is a wonderful color of life. It's very healing. And all of these things are very good and they're calming to your nervous system. So
Mm.
that's one of the things that happens is we have an autonomic nervous system that regulates our body. And it's supposed to be in balance. And when we tense up all the time, we throw that out of balance or we're in fear. So that was very, very smart of you. So that is a great idea. I think anyone that wants to can just sense themselves in a bubble of light to
Well, what
create
I
that
love,
boundary.
I
Mhm.
didn't mean to interrupt. I'm
No, go
sorry.
ahead. No, go ahead.
What I love about what you just said was it's a solution and it's absolutely free. It costs absolutely nothing to tap into your emotions and your imagination and say, "Hey, wait a second, before my day begins, I'm going to get in touch with my inner soul to become the best
Yes.
version of myself. And I have control of imagining this bubble or this car of light around me that's
Mhm.
going to protect me as I go on my whatever the day is." And we go
Yes.
back to the people that are overloaded with illness or whatever it is. I look at attorneys and all day every day they've got this angst of, if I say the wrong thing or if I don't present something the right way, somebody could go to prison for life.
Yeah.
And so they've
Yeah.
got this immense responsibility.
Right.
And before you leave for the day and you go out into the world of that, which is this huge, overwhelming responsibility of saving someone's life or saving someone's career or
Mhm.
whatever it is, it's an amazing opportunity to stop and say, "Hey, wait a second, I'm going to just get grounded and I'm going to check myself here before I move
Yes.
forward."
Yes, and the imagination is so powerful. You could imagine I do this with a white light coming down, and it's literally I sense it pushing out any debris inside of me, like stress, tension, old anger, or whatever, and just going down. So then I feel it coming out the soles of my feet down into the earth to be composted so that it then grows something positive, but it takes that energy out of my body.
Blanca says, "This is really helping, and learning about how the salvation role for others is exhausting, and I
Mhm.
have so little left for me and my family." Thank
Yes.
you for joining us and for chiming in on the larger conversation.
Yes, we can manage our own energy, but you have to know that you have that. You have the energy and you have the ability, and we can say the power, but it's really the agency. I like to liken it that you are the queen of your domain or king. And if you are the kind that ignores your emotions are your subjects. And so if you're in your ivory tower and you're just all concerned with yourself and you're in denial of these emotions, they're going to rebel one day. And they do cause physical illnesses and also dysfunctional behavior. Or are you the kind of queen who has open house on a regular basis and says, "Oh, come, subject, come, emotions, come tell me what's going on with you. Oh, let me listen. Let me now, I can, as the one in charge, say, oh, that's where that was coming from." Sometimes it is anger is a big one. It is a boundary setter. Sometimes I am righteously angry. Someone crossed a boundary, and my reaction is to say no. But sometimes it's coming from inside of myself because I have a belief that is a filter through which I'm taking in information, and then I get angry, but really it's a defense against my own sense of powerlessness or my own sense of inadequacy. So these are the kinds of things that can show up if we just stay present with our feelings so that we can really understand them. And then when we can be the queen or king of our domain.
You just said something really important that I want to highlight for a minute so that we don't let it pass without really paying homage to it.
Mhm.
You mentioned standing back and
Mhm.
looking at your emotions as if it was a third person
Mhm.
instead of like, "Oh, I'm so engulfed in this." And we see this a lot when we get to, there's a certain generation that have elder parents. And when they're dealing with their elder parents, there's a very interesting phenomenon. We've seen it a lot in the house cleaning space
Mhm.
where we go in to help somebody and they might have been the nicest person on earth.
Yeah.
But as they're losing their independence, they become violently angry and
Mhm.
mean. I mean, just flat out mean.
Yes.
And as a child of a parent like that, as you watch your parents get older and they start to lose their independence, tell us about being able to manage our emotions when we've spent our whole entire life trying to win our parents' approval, and now our parents who
Yes.
are losing their independence, really due to no fault of their own. And I understand it, but now
Yeah.
they're just like mean, and that's not who they are at all.
Yes. I actually am very glad you asked that because this is well, first of all, my own mother had Alzheimer's. My
I'm so
father-in-law
sorry.
had Alzheimer's, so I'm very familiar with this. And a lot of my clients, because I have worked a lot with um, women who they're not 20 somethings, they're more in their
Mhm.
50s, and they have aging parents. And a lot of times they come to me for career stuff, but we end up working on their relationship with their parent. And exactly what you're talking about. Maybe they weren't so nice their whole life, even, but certainly in this, at that time when they are with these challenges and they're upset, and then they cling to things and they cling to behavior. First of all, using the energetic boundaries and saying, "Oh, I'm aware of something happening here, and I'm looking at it more objectively." And recognizing that if they stay in the pattern of child to a parent who is not in a high functioning mode of living, they're not helping.
Mhm.
And they don't need to sacrifice their own happiness. It doesn't help a parent for you to sacrifice your health and well being trying to placate them. It's actually much better to separate out your own energy from them and to look at what really needs to be done. And that's happened with several of my clients where the mother was living alone. Her house, in fact, I had a client, her mother's, every time she went home, which was in another state, she spent her whole time cleaning up her mother's house. And she realized her mother was not capable of keeping a clean house. She wasn't capable. She had a dog. I mean, it was really awful. And finally, she realized she had to be in a place where she was being taken care of. And so she got up the strength and the ability to make that happen. And it was better for everybody. Her mother was happier. She was happier. It just, the whole thing worked much better. So that is really important, to have that sort of separation. And one little tool that I can tell people to do, because we tend to say, all right, I'm going to own my emotions, and I'm going to say, well, I'm angry.
Mhm.
And when you say I'm angry or I'm sad or whatever it is, then you're kind of identifying as that emotion. If you say, I'm aware of something in me that's angry,
Mm.
I'm aware of something in me that's upset. Hello. Hello, upset self. Hello, angry person, angry self. That part, you just say hello to it. So you have a bit of objectivity, or not, I call it healthy detachment. So you say, I'm aware of something in me that, or you can just be, I'm aware of something in my shoulders. It's really tight. Hello, hello, tightness. And inevitably what happens is that will, oh, you're paying attention to me. I can relax a little now.
Well, when you said that, "Hello," it sounded so loving and so like, "Come here, I have a hug for you." And
Yes.
it did completely diffuse the energy, like, "Oh, you're all angry and whatever," like, "Oh, I sense something is angry here," like, "Hello,
Yeah.
come hither."
Yes. Let me understand. What are you angry about? I want to know. And you become, like, a helper to yourself in that way.
Mm, that's beautiful. All right, so I have a question now, and this goes back to acting because you've got the acting experience, and in acting, we know a lot about subtext. Subtext is
Mhm.
the stuff that we don't actually see. It's kind
Mhm.
of like when you walk into a room and there are two people that have been fighting, and you
Mhm.
just walked in and you have no idea that they were fighting, but you walk in and you're like, "Whoa,
Uh-huh.
something is going on here." And then
Right.
you ask them, "How you doing?" And they're like, "We're fine." You're
Mhm.
like, no, that is a lie because I feel something is going on right now. Y'all are trying to trick me."
Yes, subtext, and we are all working around with that all of the time. We have something like 40,000 thoughts a day, 90% of which are unconscious. So we have habitual ways of thinking. We have feelings that pop up and subtle. The more I got into my emotions, the more I realized these little subtle ones. Oh, I know the big one when I'm really enraged, but what is that little tension that came in my body when somebody said something? And then we're all trying to be nice, especially women want to be nice, and we're not in touch with that subtle aspect of emotion. And again, it's not always about, because you don't want to express yourself when it's not safe to do so. But if you don't acknowledge the emotion, it's going to stick around and it can become physical ailment. So that subtext is really what's going on in the unconscious or subconscious mind. And that's why turning inward and befriending yourself, that little act of saying, oh, hello, is a way to develop an internal relationship with yourself. And ultimately, it brings more joy in your life.
Well, it's an interesting study because we have two sides of the fence. We have the clutterer and the hoarder
Mm-hmm.
who wants to reach out to their family, and they're ashamed to have their family come over because the family will see that their house is gross and it's fallen
Mm-hmm.
apart.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the kid who wants to reattach with their parents, for example, or their siblings, and they're afraid to go in there because then, like, I don't want to step on their toes and I don't want to go in and spend all my time cleaning, but then they don't want me around because, they're either abrupt with me or, tell me to mind my own business or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So it's two different groups of people that both, I think they want the same thing, but
Mm.
neither of them know how to approach that. And there's this weird subtext in the middle that's really interrupting the progress that either side can make.
Yes. And that speaks to one of the biggest issues is about not communicating. We go through so much pain in our lives because we don't communicate. We're afraid to say something. And there are ways to speak to someone, setting your intention that what is it that you want out of this? Is it to judge or to criticize, or is it to help? Is it to reestablish a connection that might be lost? We all need connection. Joy is actually the emotion of connection. It's not just about happiness is a part of it, but when you're really connected to the truth of what you're experiencing, there's a kind of joy to that. And so when you have the disconnect with the family, and shame is a big one, and there's actually two types of shame. There's the healthy shame, which is remorse. I've done something that's hurt someone or gone against my own values or integrity, and I feel bad about that. And I want to do something about that. That's a healthy experience of shame. But mostly what people experience is shame that is a belief that there's something wrong with me. And I think that can probably happen a lot in these situations of a person with a mess or a hoarding, that there's something wrong with me and they don't really want to look at that, understandably. But what I have found as a perfectionist, that was also my issue, as I believed there was something fundamentally wrong with me. And when I recognized that life is messy, no one's perfect, I'm not perfect, and I faced and felt that shame, it moved through me. And so it's difficult, in those situations to just say, oh, well, I know you're feeling shame and you don't need to feel shame and blah, blah, blah. But it's to take little baby steps of telling the truth with your intention to connect, so that asking permission goes a long way. There's something I really want to say. There's some feelings I have, and it's not bad. Let me just preface that. It's not bad. It's just that I feel like there's something that's disconnected between us, and I would really like to share some things, and I wonder, is that okay with you? Because
And it's interesting you bring that up. I did not get along with my mother growing up.
mm,
And when I
mm,
was 22 years old,
you-
she came to visit me. And I just really, she was pregnant the whole time that I grew up. I'm one of 19 kids, and she was
oh,
pregnant every single year of my life. And I couldn't get away soon enough. And so as soon as I left, I
wow,
was gone.
wow.
And then she came at me when I was 22 years old, and she stopped being pregnant again. Like, she'd had all the kids now. And she was like this amazing person that I never knew, because like she was totally hormonal and weird and mean growing up. And she came and she said, hey, I want to be your mom. I'm like, you already are my mom. And it
Mhm,
was that exact conversation that you just said. I want to have a conversation with you in a meaningful sort of way. And I
mm,
was like, what does that mean? And she's like, I'm not going to tell you what to do anymore, like you're an adult, but I want to start over again, and I want to erase the slate.
wow.
Well, you don't get to go 22 years into my life and then you're going to erase the slate and start over again. Like, what is up with that? And she said, is it possible And I was like, well, I don't know. And I said, what would have to happen if that was the case?
Yeah.
And she said, I would have to accept you as you are without trying to change you. And you would have to do the same for me. And I sat there dumbfounded, like, this is kind of a cool thought, but
Wow.
what a weird, bizarre conversation. Is that even possible? I'm going to have to erase the slate and start over. I'm like, I think we should give it a try. And she
Uh-huh.
said, I really want to invest in you. And I'm like, why? And she said, because you're my daughter. And I was like, oh, okay. And I said, I will invest in you, but I don't know what to invest. She lives 2,500 miles away. And this is back in the days when long distance phone calls were 65 cents a minute. And I said, okay, I will
Yeah.
invest in you too. I will call you every week and we will talk as long as you want to talk. And she said, okay. And that was 33 years ago. And what's cool about that is my mom now is my best friend. And every week she's on my calendar, like, don't interrupt this hour of my life. I'm calling my mom and we're going to have a chitty chat on the
Wow.
phone. And what's really cool about that is I got to know her on a completely different level as an
Mhm.
adult. And even though I didn't always approve of the things she did, I
Mhm.
was looking at her now based on new rules that she set up.
Mhm.
She said, I will just accept you as you are and I won't try to change you. And I was like,
Wow.
okay, let's give that a try, you know?
What a gift. What a gift. Oh my god, if every parent did that, we'd have a different world altogether. Altogether.
It changed my life
Yeah.
because
Sure.
instead of me trying to, you know how kids do weird things in hopes of their parents' approval? I could stop doing weird things and I could just be myself and she
Mm.
would just accept me carte blanche as is.
Wow. That is fantastic. Whereas I left home at 18 after I graduated from high school, I never lived at home again. I was on my own. I never, I kept my mostly my mother at a distance. I mean, I would see them sometimes, but I would go years without actually seeing them physically. And in the end, when she got Alzheimer's, I was very shocked that that actually became a healing because she forgot all the things that she was mad about.
Well, you know, it's true though. There are some toxic people. And my philosophy has been if you can't fix the situation, to limit your accessibility to those people that are just so negative. Every time you come in their space, it just brings you down.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. And even if it's your parent, you do not have to sacrifice your own life because of that.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I came to the sudden belief that our families, while we think they're the people that gave us birth and we're related to, I believe that our families now are a collection of people in our lives, and they're strangers and they're
Mhm.
friends and they might be relatives.
Mhm.
But just because someone is a relative does not make them family.
Right.
And I think we develop families based on the people that make us feel warm and fuzzy and support us, and they're in our corner of the world cheering for us and clapping for us and rooting us on. And those are the people that we choose to go through life with.
Right.
And when I was able to disassociate myself from saying, well, I have to go through life with these people because they're my family or I'm
Mhm.
related to them, I became very crystal clear that there are certain relatives that I have that they're not my family, they're
Mhm.
just relatives. And
Mhm.
when I was able to look at them like, oh, we're related, that's how this all works together, it was liberating. I was like, I don't have to go through life carrying their burdens because it's not healthy, number one. And number two, we're just relatives. Like, hooray, I get to see them at Christmas and the holidays, and then they go on their way and I go on mine, and the end.
Very healthy. That's a very healthy attitude. I commend you. And it's true. And I also learned, I mean, for one thing, it motivated me to end up doing what I'm doing, and I love what I do, and I love, I wanted to be a movie star for years, and when that wasn't gonna happen, I realized that was not my fate. That was not my destiny. This is really, what I'm supposed to be doing in this lifetime, and I also was able to understand my own mother's behavior because of the repression of women and the women being basically labeled as secondary to men in the patriarchal world that we've been living in for thousands of years. which is getting shook up right now. But uh, so releasing that and understanding my own mother and why she behaved the way she did, I had a lot more compassion for her. And she was pretty much gone by that point. So it was an interesting journey.
The message that I'm hearing from you today, really loud and clear, is have compassion for others, especially if we have a member of the family that's going through a clutter bug kind of situation where maybe
Mhm.
they've amassed too much things, and also compassion for oneself. So
Yes.
maybe you are the person that has the house full of stuff and you can't get rid of it because of, I don't know, something you paid too much money for it, or I don't know, you're hoping it'll come back in style in another 20 years or whatever it is, that you have more compassion with yourself because you do deserve to be happy. And if I
Yes.
hear Joey saying one thing, it's that you deserve joy. And it's really interesting when you mentioned, having conversations with other people and that connection is joy. But then also you expressed, and this is so interesting to me, how when you put that bubble of light around you, that you are connecting with yourself, which also brings joy. And I do
Yes.
believe we deserve a life of joy.
Yes. Yes. It was, my name is Joy. So I always say that it's like been my teacher in my life because I was not joyful when I was younger. Oh, it's very serious. And I mean, I had ulcers, a pre-ulcer stomach in elementary school. I had to get out of classroom and go have milk in the cafeteria every afternoon for a while because I had so much tension inside of me. And so for me to come from feeling very repressed and alone and sad and to a life where I feel joy and I have a wonderful marriage and I love what I do and where I live and all of that. It was a journey to get there. And that's one thing I really want to convey to people is that take a step, take a step towards self-love. And that was very hard for me to even say when I was younger, but now it's like I do love myself. And my ability to love myself helps me to love others and to understand them. And being human is messy, it is difficult. We are in a very complex, complicated world, and give yourself a break. And I mean, I have some mess around me now, right now, that I'm not too happy about, but I'm busy. And so I'll get to it. And I do love that thing about cleaning as a way to kind of clear your space and mind. But just have compassion for yourself and take a little step. Take a baby step of sitting aside 10 minutes where you're just going to sit and say, oh, I want to be with myself and allow whatever's there to come forth and be present because it has value and it's real.
Oh, that's so beautiful. That's great. So I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you wrote a book. Something inspired you to write a book, like beyond
Mm-hmm.
just teaching people and beyond having a class and
Mm-hmm.
really going to school and learning all the stuff. You sat
Mm-hmm.
down and you wrote a book, which is a huge commitment.
Yes, it was. Well, I had spent at that point, I mean, considering all of the things that I learned from my beginning journey, where it was like, I'm going to find out what the truth is about life when I was in my mid 20s, I had spent 40 years of development, of working on myself and learning these things. And I just thought, if I don't write this down and share what I have invested so much time, energy, and money in for my own life, if I don't write it down before I die, I will never forgive myself. And so I just made that commitment. And I did eventually hire a book development coach who helped me to focus. And I wanted to write a workbook. So it is somewhat of a workbook. So there's information and then there are exercises. And it's divided into the four cornerstone emotions of sadness, fear, anger, and joy. And out of this, all other feelings come. So when you can understand that, you've got your foundation. And so I took exercises that I had learned from others, that I had developed myself, and wove them into ways so that you can learn how to, in a safe and healthy way, get more and more in touch with your emotions and release old emotions from the past, learn how to stay present with what you're feeling, and then communicate with others so that you move forward in your life with that greater sense of connection, which ultimately ends you up feeling more joy because you feel more connection to your own world.
Well, I'm going to leave links in the show notes to that book because I want everybody to get a copy of that. One of the things I love about writing a book, and this is a huge commitment on your part, is that book will go places you will never go, and it will meet people you will never meet. And it will change the lives of people that don't know they need their lives changed. And what a legacy to leave behind. Thank you for doing that.
Oh, thank you for saying that. I was actually on tech support one day with computer problems, and this woman said, "Joie Seldon, did you write a book about emotions?" And I said, "Yeah." She says, "My dad loves your book." I said, "Who's your dad?" He said, "Well, he lives
Oh,
in England, and he's giving me the book too." So it's
wow.
so cool. That was like a magic moment for me.
Well, one of the things that's interesting to me is you have created magic moments for people all over the world between your coaching, which is for your women in business, and
Mhm.
then also writing your book and then doing the acting and the improv. I mean, what an amazing array of people whose lives you've changed. And I know for me, one of the things that was really important to me when I was trying to get my own emotions in control was improv. And if you'll talk to us for just a second about the improv, because for me, somebody would call me a name. I get really angry, like, how dare you?
Mhm.
And I would just take it all internally and personally. And I would repeat over and over in my head these negative things that they said to me on
Mhm.
social media or whatever. And just like, and then the whole improv concept is yes and. So
Mhm.
someone would say, you are this, that, and the other. And I'd go, yes and. And it completely diffused everything.
Oh,
And what? And then what?
yeah, life-changing, life-changing. When I was looking for an acting class when I moved to LA. When I was 20, I moved to LA, and, I was looking for an acting class, and the one person I knew in the city said, "Oh, there's this improv company and this improv class that open a class on Monday nights." I think it was $1 or $2 or something. It was a
Oh,
long
wow.
time ago. And that was it. Yes. And yeah. And I ended up performing in the improv company. Eventually it formed a new company, and I did it for 5 years. But that yes, and because it's the resistance that gets us stuck.
Hmm.
And so by saying yes, and it doesn't mean you're saying, "Oh, I agree with you."
Hmm.
It's just I'm not in denial of what just happened or what you just said. And the and is my own ability to contribute. So it's how you build a scene, it's how you build an experience in improvising. And bottom line, I believe that we all are here improvising our lives. Every day, every step, every moment, you're making it up as you go along, in essence. And so if you say yes to this, what seems to be something terrible, and now what can I do with this? But
Uh-huh.
if you just say no, then you're stuck.
Uh-huh.
So
And
it's
I think that's really important. And I want to hang on that for just a second, because a lot of us in our state of clutter and hoarding and whatever, we get paralyzed. And if
Mhm.
somebody comes to us and they're like, you're a hoarder, we take it really personally. We're like,
Yeah.
I just spent all of my day helping someone else. I came home, I'm just too tired. I just don't have it to give for myself right now. How dare you? Right?
Mhm.
How would a hoarder in that situation, and I'm going to throw this back to somebody that spent all day blessing the life of someone
Mhm.
else, they come home and they're just
Yeah.
I just don't have it to give. How do they improvise from taking their children or their sibling, their
Mhm.
spouse, somebody going, you're a hoarder? How do they take that and then improvise to a more positive note?
Yes. So if you say yes, you say, "I am a hoarder." You're saying, "I am a hoarder." I'm gonna say, "Yes, I recognize you say that." And let me look. Oh, it is very crowded in here. Yes, there are a lot of things in here. Does this serve me?
Mm.
Does this serve who I am? Does this serve what I want my life to be? if it serves you, why change? But if it's like, oh, yes, and this is causing me more stress, or maybe now it's making me have a couple of drinks before
Mm,
when I get home, or binging on TV or ice cream, but oh, yes, this is messy and this is crowded and it doesn't feel good. Yes, and what's the and?
mhm,
And I could get someone in to help me. I could just confess to my loved one or someone, or I could get therapy, or call you. There's, the options. And that's the thing. When you say no, then your focus is very narrow. But if
mhm,
you say yes, and it opens the door to so many other choices and possibilities. We live in a very rich, phenomenally creative world. I love to watch nature shows because nature is just blows my mind with the variety. And yet we humans get very narrow in our scope of thinking and our view. And the emotions, unexpressed, unprocessed emotions, are what keeps us stuck there. So when we can open up, and whew, sometimes maybe you're going to feel a little, or you're going to feel like, oh, I just want to cry. It's like, oh, this is horrible. I don't want to cry. Cry. Crying is so cleansing. I want to rage at this, rage at it, but let that energy flow and you will find a lot more fulfillment in life. That's always been my goal, fulfillment of myself.
and if we take that improv concept and we
Mm.
add that to the
Mhm.
emotions,
Yeah.
so now you're grieving. Yes, I'm grieving, and this person was really important in my life, and they really brought me a lot of joy. And I'm
Mhm.
afraid if I get rid of their stuff, it's going to break my heart because it's like me officially saying goodbye to them. But
Mhm.
I know that I will always have the memories we had together, even if I don't save their stained t-shirt or whatever it is.
Yes. 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 And can I give it to someone? Is there somebody else gonna be really use it and benefited by it? Or maybe it needs to go, but you don't have to lose the person or the memory
Mhm.
or the meaning.
I've loved our conversation today.
Oh.
Just the different approach at looking at our own emotions is so powerful,
Hmm.
because sometimes we are trapped in our own head, and just taking a step back and looking at it like a third person, like Joy said, where you see the emotion and you're like, hey, I sense some sadness here. Hello, sadness. I think that's so healing, and I'm so glad we had this time together. Will you tell our listeners again where they can go to get your book? And if you'll show it to us, this is just an awesome book. I want to make sure that those that are just joining us get a chance to see this.
Yes, and thank you. I've loved this conversation as well. I love you. I think you're fantastic. Your attitude is just brilliant. And this is the book. It's called Emotions and Owner's Manual. And it's on Amazon and print, Kindle, and audible.com. And if you really want to go for it, get the print and the Audible so you can hear the guided visualizations and meditations that I send you through. While you also have this as a workbook, a reference book. And one of the things people do with this, like, oh, wow, what was that thing on anger that I read? Or what was that exercise on anger? And they go and look at the book and then go back to um, the section on that. So it's a great reference book and something, because it can be, we don't remember how to be our perfect selves. There's no such thing as perfection. I've learned that. Uh, and I still have to go back myself. As much as I know, I have my days where I'm defensive, or I'm feeling let down, or I'm feeling depressed, or I'm feeling hopeless. But it doesn't last very long at all, because I allow the flow. Emotional fluidity is a state that's healthy for your mind, it's healthy for your body, and it's healthy for the world at large, because you're going to be putting out into the world something that is beneficial for everyone when you are in alignment with your true self. Everyone has something to offer. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with you. It's just a belief. So take the plunge, get some help, and enjoy your life and experience more joy. That's what I wish for you.
Well, thank you so much. I am so excited that we had this conversation today. And like Joy said, and I'm going to really recommend that you get a copy of this book. I will leave links in the show notes. The chance for us to improve is worth the price of the Audible book and the book itself. And I don't want you to go through life and say, oh, I was so close. There were some solutions and I chinched out and I didn't get them. So don't do that. We have one question, and I don't know if we're going to have time for it. What I would like to do is I would like to add that to the notes below when we can really give it the time and attention it deserves. And so the question is, how do you find good therapy for hoarding? Do you have anything you want to add at the last minute here, or is that something we should take a look at when the show is over?
I think you can take a look at that when the show is over. I like somatic therapy, body-based somatic therapy. That's what I actually recommend. And there's a lot of ways to find a somatic therapist.
Okay, we will spend more time on that, and I will come back in the show notes so that we can answer. And anybody that's watching the replay, please leave your questions. We're going to be revisiting this again and again. But thank you so much, you guys, for joining us. Joy, thank you so much for being here today. This was so enlightening, and I want to give you a great big hug. I just had so much fun with you here today.
Thank you. I loved it.
Thank you, guys. Take care, and we'll see you again, same time, same place next week.